I mean, yeah, I don't even use DCC, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't like the option or any of the new tooling they're doing for that. Like some of those new, have you seen the new Annie and Clarabel? Like they have new detail. I think they actually have hooks on the chassis. That's pretty, I don't know, not fair to me, you know, at least just a little bit. Okay, they did have to wait quite a bit longer for that line to come out, but that doesn't mean Bachmann can just retool the American stuff. Like, you know what I'm saying? Oh, it's like that. So I have to do this whole video by myself. Okay, yeah, fair point. It is 3 in the morning. You make a lot of fair points now that I think about it. Okay, well, it looks like today's video will be a solo project, but that's fine. What exactly do you need for this modification? Well, of course you need the Bachmann Annie and Clarabel. They will be the focal point of what we're working on and modifying today. And first things first, before you do anything, you want to take these things apart. Take out the wheels, take off the couplers, and of course take off the roofs, which sometimes is a very, very hard thing to do, but thankfully on these two, they come off relatively not that bad. So these two models, just like my Bachmann Thomas, were sent to me by my good friend Andrew, or Wooden Fam 1. And also just like Thomas, as you may have seen on the bottom, they are classic 2002 models, and pretty much are the exact same, well, thing you get today, depending on the region you're in. If you're in the US, you have these things, just like me. But if you're in the UK, not only do they have, you know, already black chassis, red buffers, and hooks, but actually, that's all they have, but still, that's pretty damn cool. Back to these two models, again, I do think they're pretty cool, but the, you know, not inclusion of a hook, I'm not gonna lie, just kind of irks me. And sadly, that is something that we don't fix in this video, since I don't have 3 links and don't want to just break up other pieces of rolling stock for a hook, but that will be something I do eventually. I just prefer 3 links. It's just not something I do in this video. We do plenty else, though, and thankfully, to complete the models. Now, this Annie and Clarabel are in pretty good shape, but sadly do have a few things kind of wrong with them. Like, there is some scuffs in the paint, so I will have to come back and correct or paint match that to fix that. But I also hope to go for a Season 5 look. Their weathered Season 5 look before they got replaced with those new resin copies, which, you know, is kind of funny, since eventually I do plan to replace these with the Bachmann UK version of these, but you know, life imitates art sometimes. So by the end of this video, we'll not only be restoring these two, but kind of turning them into their in-house state, I guess. But one of the largest issues, which you may have already seen, lies on Annie. She's actually missing a back buffer head, and it just so happens I don't have a, you know, another coach to fix that, and these buffer heads are pretty particular in their size. But thankfully, I do have another way to fix that. So really quick, we'll jump on that process. And what I do to do that is remove the other buffer heads, so there's none there now, and then replace them with Bachmann Emily buffer heads. So not only did the homie send me a Bachmann Thomas and Annie and Clarabel, but also a pretty busted up Emily, and some of her parts are coming into use here. Yeah, at least in that process, there's really not a lot going on. It's just me holding the buffer in place until it's solid. Now, when it comes to paint restoration, this was something, you know, overall I just didn't see coming. I had this brown by Revel, which I've used in the past to make coaches before in Trackmaster. Was kind of eyeing that next to Annie and Clarabel, and this is just the perfect match, even though it shouldn't be. You know, the lid does not reflect this color. But believe it or not, if you take a Tamiya light gray primer, spray that first, and then put this over top, it's, you know, pretty identical. This is a painted back end, and it looks pretty solid. I use this to not only fix the marks on the face on Clarabel, but just the back of Annie and just anywhere that needed it. But sadly, at the price of becoming a Oompa Loompa temporarily. Now, just a little bit ago, you saw me mask off the transparent parts of the roof, and, well, as you'll soon see, there's a reason for that. We're going to really quickly also prime that in the Tamiya light gray and do the same with the chassis. The bodies themselves are also given a matte clear coat, and after that, I give everything just overnight to dry. I finally go to sleep at this point. Now, the next morning, it was time to paint everything. So not only did I paint the chassis a, matte black and also the inside of the body too, but also painted the roofs a dark gray. This is something I'd come back to later since the roof does end up a bit weathered, but just for now, here's reference for the overall color I do use. Don't worry, I do darken this up shortly. And now we remove the tape from that. So at this point, there was something I really wanted to add to Annie and Clarabel, but didn't really know how I was going to do it, and that was lighting. I just didn't know what the best way to do it was. Do I get a actual model lighting kit? I mean, you could, but those are pretty expensive, normally $20 to $50 each, and I have 2 coaches that need it. Well, my fiance recommended we go look at a hobby store, or I think it was, no, it was Michael's. That's where we found these little diorama LEDs, and they are, well, pretty bright, as you can see here, and it just so happened pretty fitting for a 00 scale coach, but it does require some modification. So to get these to fit, I'll need to Dremel out the bottom and also make a couple holes inside of the body, or just a pretty large area for that light and all of the wiring to fit into. Oh yeah, I also added a figure inside of Clarabel, and this is something that requires, you know, me to Dremel a bit more later, sadly on the transparent part of the roof or the windows, but it is what it is. It just gives her a bit of life. Okay, so now we move on to weathering, and this is something that scares me, you know, to this day, every time I do it. So if this is something you're doing with me, don't worry if you're anxious or just overall feel like you might ruin the model. You won't. This is something that takes time and effort and a lot of, it's just tedious, trust me. Now, to weather these two, I use 3 powders overall, that being this dark brown and a light brown, which you're also seeing now. And with any luck, by mixing these two, we can make it look like there's a pretty solid buildup on them both. But we also use this rustic color, which I forgot I had. It just so happens to match their paint pretty much identically, but when you spray it with a matte clear coat, it becomes a bit more rustic, so it's perfect for just a little bit of discoloration and also blending those browns in. And here you see this process. Again, this is something that took so long. I think I had to go back after spraying these things with matte clear maybe 7 or 8, 9 times. Yeah, sadly, it takes a lot of layering, a lot of time. It's kind of a process, but you will get there. And I even messed up pretty bad, as you'll soon see, or pretty significantly, in a couple spots on these two, and it still worked out in the end, or at least enough to where I'm satisfied with the result. Now, you may not have noticed it, but there's a bit of brown now showing on the interior of Annie and Clarabel, and that's where I messed up the first time. I was not trying to add any brown to these two, but accidentally picked that up and not the matte clear, and sprayed it on Clarabel. That's why her face is now pretty dull. I wasn't, expecting to be spraying that. It's actually a satin brown by Rust-Oleum, but when I saw it, it didn't really discolor the brown in a way that didn't look weird. It just, again, discolored the brown. So I actually went around both and kind of just added hints of it, not only to make Annie match, but just because it kind of looked good and matched the reference. There was also a mishap on Annie. I was using the Rebel Brown to tone down some of the weathering I had added on the bottom and kind of sprayed directly on her name, and that's why I came back with the brown and just decided to make it heavier on the bottom. But again, that did kind of save it. It just looks like she has a heavier, weathering on the bottom. It's really not something I'm too mad at. Thankfully, it was pretty much saved, and again, in the end, I'm still proud of these two. So, yeah, mistakes will happen, but it doesn't have to define the entire project. Alright, so we've returned after another matte clear coat, and also started to weather those roofs. So the process for this, believe it or not, really isn't that rough. I essentially masked them off again and took some matte black, sprayed the entire thing, that being the top and bottom, and then took the original gray and sprayed that along the sides, and that not only made it a bit more dark, but gave a little bit of black discoloration along the middle. I also sadly didn't realize I wasn't recording when I did this bit, but I dry brushed just a little bit of white and gray on the chassis, so that wasn't just super clean, while everything else had a bit of grime and dirt to it. And finally, we can start to put everything back together. This has been a process that, again, as I'm sure you can tell, was a bit stressful, but really paid off in the end. I'm very happy with not only how these models look, but, you know, the light up function. I forgot to mention, I went back for the lights because, let's be real, that blue was a bit obnoxious, and, well, painted the LEDs. They are now a much more just warm and neutral yellow. I went back in, gave everything a final matte clear coat. But let me not tell you, let me just show you. For now, ladies and gentlemen, guys and gals, non-binary pals, let's move on to the glamour shots. And boom, just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we have now bettered our Bachmanns. Not only do these two have a just overall Season 5 weathering, but, well, lighting too, and much more interesting elements for whenever you look at them. They will definitely, or hopefully, turn eyes whenever they make their way to a train show. Now again, I am calling these two complete, but there is one crucial part they're missing, and that is 3 links or hooks. And truth be told, that's the reason I haven't added those hooks yet. I don't see a point in putting fake ones on when eventually I'll put real ones on that, you know, will make those hook and loops completely useless. But again, at the very least, that aside, at least these two are just so much more interesting now. The light works a lot better than I thought it would, despite it being a bit tedious to install on both. I was pretty terrified during the entire weathering process, but again, after just a lot of effort and going back to it and, well, just keeping trying, it ended up in something I'm very proud of. I really like these two, and, well, hopefully you guys did too, and figuring out how I did this and how you can do the same thing. Now, sadly, I do owe you guys a running session, and that's because the layout is currently, well, this, as you can see. Yeah, update coming soon. But with any luck, that will change soon and, you know, won't follow behind this too long. With all that being said, hopefully you guys still enjoyed watching. And on that note, you know, I just kind of wonder. Who's next?
Either subscribe, donate, or get the fuck out.